welcome to this interview, hosted by PRODIGI. It's a research group in UNIR, and I'm Mercedes Quero Julián. I'm co-director of PRODIGI. Well, it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be joined by Professor Bill Cope and Professor Mary Kalantzis. So, both leading voices in the fields of multiliteracies, multimodal learning, and digital education, indeed. So their research, I would say, has shaped how educators worldwide think about literacy, if I may, and not as single skill, of course, but as a dynamic set of practices that prepare students to communicate, learn, and create meaning across multiple modes of technology. So this interview will explore the relevance of multiliteracy in higher education, online teaching, and AI-enhanced learning environment. So we hope your reflections will offer valuable insights for educators, researchers, students, and other stakeholders. So thank you both for being with us. And well, let's begin with our first question. First question is, how would you define the roles of multimodal literacy in today's educational landscape, so particularly in higher education?
Right. I'll start off, Bill. Yes. It's become a complex issue, right? The idea of multimodality in literacy making. But, in our work, the work that we've presented, we have said that meaning making for the whole of human history has been multimodal. Right. People make meaning with their bodies, with signs, with all sorts of forms. But with the invention of the printing press and the book, we narrowed meaning making in the formal school to alphabetical or symbolic literacy, right? In books, in text, and in exams, all done in whatever the language or the symbolic system of the school was. And we predicted, well, not what we predicted, when we wrote the Multiliteracies Manifesto, we said there was a lot, despite that, the world was becoming more diverse in the way that it made meaning. And of course, the digital was one of the most powerful interventions because the affordances of the digital allow you to do things that you couldn't do before, right? And also it expanded the way, the modes in which we can do it in. Like now we are talking and also visually being represented, and audio, we could do it without it, and we're gesturing to each other. So we predicted that this was going to become more important. And I don't think we realized just how important, because now AI has exploded it even further. And although AI is based on a language model, of course, it's a large language model, its affordances keep changing, and it's able to collect data from a contextual context and make now multimodal meaning. So we've come full circle to the possibility, as a consequence of the tools that we have at the moment, to make meaning across different modes and for different purposes. Now, have we accepted it in schools? Have we accepted it, in higher education? I think because of the traditions and habits of the textbook, the lecture, the publication, which have offered, great progress and, a lot of advantages, it's hard for professionals and experts to change what they're doing when it's worked for them in their lives. Although the gap between what our learners are doing at home and what they're doing in formal education is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think your questions now about the role of multiliteracies and multimodal literacies. And what do we do about it as educators is very apt.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of track back over some of the same territory. I mean, the word we use is affordance. What did the printing press do is the first question, right? So, and the printing press and print literacy becomes a focal point in modern institutionalized education. It's kind of the pivot point which produces modern institutionalized education and modern knowledge systems, to be quite frank. That includes research knowledge, canonical knowledge in every domain, medicine, you know, every possible domain becomes part of the universe of the printing press. Now, before that, and by the way, that then becomes privileged at a number of levels. It becomes privileged in various textual literacies around science, also around religion, by the way, the arrival of religions which are textually based. Of course, there was a big moment also with the invention of writing, but that's another step back. In our modern times, and, you know, of course, what writing does, it replaces these other totally synesthetic systems of dance and mnemonics around orality and whatever. So writing is one transition. And writing becomes the preserve of ruling classes, and, you know, some people have it, some people don't, and that becomes a differentiator of power. Literacy, the printing press then kind of, in a way, exacerbates that. So the printing press comes along and just by virtue of its mechanics, it separates text from image, and of course other things as well. But text and image is most interesting because, you know, the letterpress machine was a fundamentally different technology from lithography, which is the way to reproduce image. And in a way, the big trend towards multimodality in education really begins with the arrival of, and this is kind of an arcane kind of, but important point, often lost, with offset printing. So offset printing in the 20th century puts image and text on the same page. So our textbooks end up being able to do that because you use actually what it means is you use photolithography for everything, text and image, right? And then moving forward now, in terms of affordances, then what the digital does uniquely, it means it's possible to do image as well as text by digital reduction to digital form, as well as sound, and by extension, body and movement via video and all that kind of stuff. So, so the question about these affordances is quite important. And, you know, the interesting thing is that education, so bound as it is to literacy, and so bound as is the history of the written word, lags in all of this. So, you know, what an absurd thing that canonical knowledge in the 21st century is still in PDF files, right, which are pages which don't scroll, and where you can't easily put a video in there. You know, so, and you're not even, you know, if they lock them up sufficiently, you can't even search the damn things. So this is the, you know, the PDF for me is the legacy of print literacy and the kind of inertia that we have in this environment. And what we see kind of interestingly is the rise of you know, multimodality, where perhaps in our program, for example, students build assignments which have video and image all the way through them because they're not in the rise of video journals. So in areas like surgery, for goodness sake, you know, we need a video of what's going on. We don't want to about surgery. So in other words, you know, the kind of the push of knowledge systems in this multimodal direction as more kind of thorough and holistic forms of knowledge representation. And of course, that's paralleled by the massive multimodality of popular media, social media, and all the rest, are massively multimodality. So the question really then is how we as educators keep up with that. Now, AI is another very complicated question after that.
If we take a step back, I mean, I think it was COVID that first forced all of us, everybody.
No, this is the online question.
Yes, to move into an online environment, right?
Yeah.
So that, and I think that a lot of people found that a terrible experience, both students and educators, because they hadn't been prepared for it, right? So many people reacted very negatively. But we said at that point, you know, if we go back to the word Bill is emphasizing, affordances, what did the digital afford, and what did we use of those affordances? So if
Okay.
we say ubiquitous learning anywhere, anytime, did we
Mm.
do that? Or did we just use online in daytime? You know, we had active knowledge making. Did we use it in order to engage learners in making their own knowledge and contribute it? Because they could do that, they could upload it. Multimodal meaning making, did we modify what we asked as an artifact, or did we say, write the essay, you know, do the quiz? Did we encourage learners to make meaning, whether in history or whatever discipline, using multimodality? And of course, feedback. One of the most powerful things that the online environment allows you is ongoing feedback, you know, all the time. Well, did we use that? Have we used it effectively?
Mm.
Important, I've got 7. The fifth one is collaborative learning. In a classroom, you know, it's hard to do collaborative learning. We try to form groups, but in an online environment, it's much easier. We can have breakout rooms, we can set up different systems, but collaborative knowledge becomes really important and not disruptive to the 1-hour period or to the 2-hour period. And of course, metacognition, which allows us to reflect on what we're doing. That's another affordance because it's all documented and we have traces of everything, right? It's not that you're going to go to the test and just look at that. Everything that we do is available for us. And finally, it also allows for differentiated learning. Also hard in the classroom to differentiate if you've got 30 or 40 or, you know. However, in the online environment, in the digital environment, you can differentiate for a group or for a subject or for individual needs. So those 7 affordances we put out, you know, around about after COVID, I think.
Oh, but mind you, in digital environments, you can fail to do all of these.
Yes.
So the whole point is the world, you know, the awful learning management systems we have at the moment, where there's just text list of week 1, week 2, read the reading, do the quiz, you know, answer the answer's A. You know, they don't do any of these things. So the whole idea of the affordance thing is not that technology necessarily produces constructive change. You can use those technologies to do the to reproduce the world or the worst of anachronistic literacy practices, an anachronistic pedagogical practice. You can use it for that. It will do all of that for you. The affordance question is, what scope is there to do things which are different? And ironically, these different things have been the hope of progressive educators since the beginning of modernity, and never been realized because of the resistances around this world of print literacy. You know, our kind of argument then is, okay, we've got these, you know, these radically new tools. And when I say new, digitization of text really begins 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It is pretty darn new. And the internet is, you know, 80s, 90s, you know, it's pretty darn new. And have we used them to good effect in education? Well, a lot of times we use them for the worst of, you know, to reproduce the worst of what we've always done. But our question is, what scope is there for something different and better, which realizes a whole lot of old aspirations of progressive educators?
But I'm thinking about, I mean, in this online environment at the university level, I mean, I completely agree with the affordances you've mentioned, of course, Mary, but what about the presence? I mean, because in general, it is only the teacher, okay, or the lecturer who turns on the camera, okay, and the students, they communicate, they interact with written chats, and they don't see each other, the teacher doesn't see, okay, the students. And I'm thinking about this communication and collaborative learning. I mean, this engagement, okay, that...
So our argument would be...
Can I say first,
critical argument would be...
The first iteration was as you described, because people tried to reproduce, you know, the lecture theatre with the silent students, the teacher speaking in the front, and maybe putting a hand up. So the first iteration of the online replicated that model. And you are quite right that that model is worse than being in a class.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So So, but what we say in the affordances is these are some of the things you can do, right? And it's possible to do. The commercial products, though, also went with what teachers were comfortable with, the narrow, the narrow thing. But we as educators have to build repertoires, collaborate with others to create the tools that allow for collaboration, that allow for community building, that allow for feedback. Sorry.
So I was going to say, just to backtrack, my rhetorical question is, what kind of presence is there in a lecture theatre? You know, it's not structured around any social relationship. The only presence is you trip somebody over and they trip over someone in the corridor who says, "Oh, wasn't that a boring lecture?" Or you trip over someone in the corridor who says, "Oh, that bit was kind of interesting, but it's not really," or trips over someone in the corridor who says, "It's a nice day today," right? So in other words, that my argument is the historical forms of presence in a lecture theatre, the historical forms of presence in a textbook, the historical, you take all the principal artifacts of traditional pedagogy, the principal forms of presence in a test, the answer is there isn't much presence. It's just you and stuff you remember. So, if you take all those key artifacts of education, lecture theatres, textbooks, tests, none of them were architected around presence. Presence was incidental and accidental, right? Now, what's tragic then is you get a learning management system and presence is incidental and accidental in the same ways. Somebody puts some cheeky comment in the chat, right? During somebody puts a private comment in the chat. It's not instrumented around that centrally, the presence thing anyhow. On the other hand, one of the things we've learned, which is quite remarkable about social media, is the power of distributed presence, right? Which is, I can be quite close to people who are closer than ever to people I'm close with, even if they're not in the same room as me. I can I can see what they're reading, I can see where they're going on holidays, I can see their family. So what we've learned from social media is a whole new world of presence that defies not only space but time, right? Which is, it's asynchronous. I mean, someone's had the dinner last night, but I only opened my social media today, and then I put a comment on it. So what's interesting is what I think we need to be looking for is firstly a critique of presence in traditional educational context. And by the way, how learning management systems and Zoom reproduce everything was awful about that. And the second thing we need to do is mine these new forms of atemporal, aspatial presence, which are so powerful in social media.
Now, we say these things to you as theorists and as academics. However, what we've been forced to do over the years is to create the tools that can realize what we say to you. Right. So in our teaching, right, we've created what we call cyber-social tools, which is the relationship between humans and the digital affordances. And we flip our classroom, right? So the lecture goes into videos like this that they can read. The resources are there, the activities are there. And then when we come together with the students, we talk about their work, right? Yeah. That's what we do. We require them to give feedback to each other, right? Online, to comment on each other's work. So we've created a vibrant environment where they engage.
And asynchronous.
Synchronous and asynchronous. But we had to invent those tools, right? Because they don't exist. So
I mean, our scholar thing is a radical critique of learning management systems. So one of the things is everything you do is visible to others, and there's a kind of an expectation, there's a reciprocal conversation about that.
Right.
So everything, our argument is it's possible in a digital environment to build things which are far more social than these legacy institutions ever were. Just because you made friends in the playground doesn't mean that the institution was social. It was deeply antisocial.
Right. So, Mercedes, we did this not because we wanted. We're not techie people. We're not coders. But we thought we had to put our money where our mouth was. Like we had
to put our practice where our theory was.
Yeah, that's
right. Money.
We had to prove it was possible, right? And even now we keep modifying it. Now we're encouraging people to use AI and multimodal tools, but we're also tracking where it comes from. So we know how much they use AI and how much they is their original work. And we have analytics that track everything that they do and gives them feedback just in time. So,
but also a lot of
we're
social stuff,
interested
a
in-
lot of interaction. So some of the interaction is highly structured around peer review, around rubrics. Some of the interaction is very informal, but instead of it being the chat on the right-hand side where people are talking about private things and stuff and, you know, public things which are kind of peripheral, that the conversation is now central. Everything's social. So in a number of ways, you know, we've built this Scholar platform over a number of years, I might say. And we keep kind of iterating and
it's
building
just a
it.
research project which we keep.
Well, it's more than you know, we want to know that if we're talking this stuff, we can make it work. If we want, you know, and the word we use is collaborative intelligence, which is none of our intelligence can be measured by turning up at the exam and seeing what we remember. You know, all our intelligence is social. It's reference to the past. It's done in dialogue with each other. So how do we build an environment which is truly collaborative and where the learning is a product of collaborative intelligence? So we're kind of interested in that question. And now we're in this very strange world where one of the collaborators is AI, which is another whole story. But, you know, but even before that, you know, the Scholar environment we built where we tried to demonstrate in practice. And look, our conclusion is it's far better than any conventional classroom. Now, you know, we wanted to build something that was far better than any conventional classroom in terms of levels of engagement, levels of collaboration, sociability, collective knowledge making. And what we can achieve online would logistically not be possible in the same way in person. Now, of course, we have live meetings and we kind of have, you know, do some stuff in person and whatever, but it's no longer the core. This is the core because of the affordances that are offered.
We meet in person with our students we like a mini conference. So the online,
but it's peripheral. It's non-essential. The other stuff's essential.
Your problem, and not your problem, the way you've cast the questions is what happens to regular teachers in regular higher ed contexts, right? And how do they do it when the systems, when the business model of a university, as you know, relies on people being present. You know,
it's a real estate business.
It's real estate because they've got rooms.
You know, they build buildings and then they got to be people in the rooms.
And they have the cafeteria and they have the buses that take them. So it's very,
which is all very nice, by the way, but nevertheless also non-essential. But even within that context, you have to change the communicative architecture, right?
Yeah.
To transform the place, and you can do that. You know, you can keep all the nice gardens and the fancy buildings
but do something different in them,
right? But do something different in them and have kind of these media systems, if you like, which back them up, which are truly collaborative, truly social, truly all the 7 things Mary mentioned.
But it also then goes to the educators. They are not the gods on the stand. They have to collaborate with each other. You can't make this transition on your own, right? So educators and cross-disciplinary have to break down the walls, collaborate together, have something hybrid. It's got to be hybrid. Some things happen in person, some things happen online. We have to redesign the ecosystem of learning. The whole ecosystem of learning, and we can't do it as individuals, right? We have, although we have tried to model that it's possible, and so have others, you know, around the world. But right now, our learners, you know, whether it's history or science or data, they're getting more from AI, more because AI has everything the world has ever written. And you just have to put in the right prompt and it'll give you much more than a teacher can give you or a textbook. Now that's a reality.
But also,
it's out there.
If we move on to that conversation, there's a new job for teachers.
Yes. You know, the main thing that people are anxious about now is cheating. You know, that's the big deal. They're cheating. They're going to AI and they're cheating. Well,
by the way, there's a big problem there, which needs to be given a different name. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, but we can solve that too. As I said, we can document what they take from anywhere. It's possible to do that, right? But we have to also educate them to be ethical about how they take things, how they document them, how they source them. That they need new skills. All our learners need new sets of skills now about how you engage with the whole world at your fingertips, right? But that material is fine-tuned and controlled by the individuals whose system that you're using. So you have to be discerning and not take everything literally. So it's not one way or the other, right? The human part and the digital part are going to have to coexist.
So, but this is a fundamental problem. We can actually give the instruction that the human part and that's nice. They're all going to coexist. What's problem? And by the way, we coexisted with the library in the past, and we coexisted with the textbook. But what was always possible in the past is distinguish the books in the library from the textbook from the student work, and we had protocols for doing that. The protocols were called citation, which is quote the other person, don't copy the other person, paraphrase the other person by all means, but don't, but when you do paraphrase the other person, cite them, right? So we built a whole lot of protocols around that. And in a way, what was easy about those protocols, it was easy to track any infringements of those protocols in terms of the ethics, right? It's no longer possible to track that.
No.
So the AI detectors don't work. So now this is kind of a little cheating's to trivialize the problem. Cheating just calling it that trivializes the problem. And as a matter of fact, a rather nice quote that I kind of like is that there's an English educator by the name of Mike Sharples, and he called it democratizing cheating, because what he estimated was that 15% of essays, assignments submitted in US education had been written by paper mills. Paper mills are people who in India or goodness knows what, for $100 will write your essay for you. Well, now it's cheaper, right? So his idea, all it does is democratize historical processes. Now, the tragedy of this, by the way, vis-a-vis literacy, is if it meant we went to doing ABCD tests on, highly proctored conventional tests, right? And that's one possible reaction which will make things much worse. One of the great things about writing in higher ed is that it's what we call complex epistemic performance. It's a way to actually expose your reasoning in a systematic kind of way in text. So we've got a real problem here. And the bigger problem behind that is what a recent writer is called cognitive offloading, which is what's kind of remarkable about these AIs and kind of surprising because it's happened so quickly, is they are able to do thinking work for you and really well, right? So the question then is how you know what the relationship. Now, of course, having a colleague or a friend or an AI peer with you as a student is a fantastic thing because they can push your thinking. They can actually, in kind of the,
Agents,
the agent or whatever can AI agents can push your thinking in all kinds of ways, but they can also do the thinking for you. And at what point is, how do we know that? We can talk till the cows come home about ethics, but if we don't have a way to track ethics, we did before around plagiarism detectors, we don't anymore. So one of the things we've been working on is in our Scholar environment, we built an environment which gives a whole lot of AI tools, but via a mix of contextual and generative AI. The generative AI is the tools, the contextual AI is the work that you do. We keep a detailed record of the way in which you interact with the AI, how much work you did, how much work it did, and the extent to which it pushed your thinking. So there are kind of technical solutions to this as well.
But we can take smaller steps in a traditional classroom, Mercedes, where we do allow multimodal ways of representing knowledge.
But that's not AI.
It's not AI.
Right. And the point is, we cannot take steps in a traditional classroom to alleviate this problem without technical solutions.
He's going to make it hard for you.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say, look, this is absolutely, look, with the AIs that are publicly available, it's an insoluble problem.
Yeah, so what you're hearing is from us, knowing what the moment is and what we're being trained to do and what our students have been trained to do, right? And how the gap is getting bigger because of the affordances of the digital and the affordances of AI. So we're caught there in the middle, and a lot of universities saying, let's keep it out. Let's keep it out. We'll do a little bit of multimodality. We'll accept images as well as text, but let's keep it away. And that's the
Let me just
first
say,
reaction. But as Bill says, it's going to accelerate, right? Continue to accelerate the impact it has on education.
Right.
So we need to take control. We, the educators, need to take control. And so we have to figure out what new rules we need, or what new skills we need, what new orientations we need. And we have to do it collaboratively, in a system. Collaboratively and work with our learners to move in these more engaging directions to prepare them for a future that is going to be very different from the one in which you and I and Bill grew up in, and the jobs they're going to have.
Let me go back to
Mercedes say something. Mercedes.
No, I was thinking about, educators, we have to do that, but do you think we are ready? Are educators ready?
No.
No.
Because I think when you talked about students' new skills, right? They need new skills, but what about educators?
Right.
No,
at the beginning, you said something. We wrote the Multiliteracies Manifesto 30 years ago. And you are correct. It's influenced the world where people have understood that multilingualism, different dialects. And so there is a sensibility that understands it. And there are pockets of people who use multimodality all over the place. So that is a step in this direction. But what's happened with AI has happened suddenly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, on top of all this.
One really important point is this is a surprising and huge return to text, right? So we've said all we've said about multimodality, but let's the generative AI. Look, there's a bigger story. There've been multiple generations of AI. This is in our conception a third generation. That's another whole story. It's a radical shift. Sparked by a single publication in 2017, this technology. So the large language model stuff is a fundamental shift in the history of AI, and it's a new technology, a third generation AI technology, which is fundamentally new. What's surprising to us who have dealt with multimodality for a long time, it is absolutely a text-centered, text-dominated technology, right? So the irony is now you cannot think about, and the word Mary and I use is transposition. You cannot think about transposition in these environments except with text involved and text centrally involved. The large language model stuff is simply leveraging the semantics in every published text that humans have created, just about every public text. Now that's a kind of unusual thing. And then what happens then in other modes like image is actually derivative. So we've done an article about this, which is in the Multimodality in Society article. Image is derivative in the sense that image generators only work around A, the labels in image corpora, the textual labels in image corpora, and B, the language prompts, which then pull out regenerated images. It's slightly different in music, but not too different. So, one of the things is then multimodality becomes incredibly important as the transpositions between other modes and text, right?
However, even as we're talking,
and by the way, by text, we don't mean speech.
Yeah.
We mean written text,
Yes.
specifically written text, and specifically written text with its peculiar forms, which are very different from speech.
I was going to say, but even as we're talking, the emphasis towards robots, right, and the use of robots needs to be multimodal because the world is multimodal. And they need to take data, contextual data. So all this, it's progressing, the whole domain is progressing towards multimodality, right? Using tokens, yes, using language tokens, but creating agents, creating artifacts, creating robots who can see, who can hear, who can touch things. So
The language, the irony is,
but it's
written
based on the
text, the
tokens.
semantics of written text is what drives
Yes,
it. This is an
token.
incredible paradox and irony.
Yeah.
So anyhow, look, the long and short of it is we're now kind of working in the space. We're building stuff. So, you know, we've got notional solutions to all the many of the problems that we've been working on. It involves staying away from the main public interfaces of the AIs. We use them down the back as foundation models. But
We haven't
another whole story is we could show you.
We haven't
So, well, I appreciate your time, Bill, Mary. It's been a pleasure, and of course, I appreciate your generosity, okay, in sharing your experience, okay.
Thank you for being interested.
Thank you. Well, we will continue learning from your work, I'm pretty sure.